Let's wait 2 more minutes until everyone is here. Carsten, have you returned from your coffee?
Yes, I have.
Good evening, as appropriate.
So one more thing that we maybe can briefly discuss now that Christopher is here is what the intention is with respect to the actual data format specification. I forgot what's its name, Gordian something. Whether that's something that the CBOR working group should work on, or some other activity in the IETF should pick up.
Thanks. I've added it to the agenda for today.
Thank you.
Christian, there are two other things that I would love to maybe talk about. One of which is the registration of tags. We chose some. Anyhow, we it's
that's essentially the
defined
same
in.
question. So we can discuss that another same point.
Well, that's actually a different. Well, anyhow, there may be some confusion about what we're registering. So that has nothing to do with DCBOR. So maybe we can talk about that. So the other thing is, do we know how many people are actually? I mean, are we only going to be meeting virtually at San Francisco, or so far I think Karsten's not going to be there. I don't know who's going to be there in person for the CBOR meeting. I mean, it's next door to me, so it's easy for me. So that was another one of my questions. It's like, what's the agenda for, and how many people and et cetera for the face-to-face?
The agenda is something that is the main agenda point for today. And I think Carsten has prepared slides primarily on that.
Cool.
So I've taken that as a question for India already.
Okay.
Okay, seeing that it's 3 past the hour, and I think we are at least 5 people altogether. Let's get this started. Hello, everyone. This is an IETF interim of the CBOR working group. You all know how this works. The note well applies, and everyone, please also have a look at the minutes. The link is at the top in the note-taking tool, so that we can work together on this. And thanks, Marco, for taking the lead here. So we have, as we've basically we've already done the agenda bashing. We want to talk about what we do at the IETF in San Francisco. I want to follow up on the working group adoption calls on EDN literals and the CDAL 2.0 roadmap. That would be very short. And then we can continue with the topics of Gordian and registration of tags. If there is nothing more to add here, Carsten, please take it away on the topic of what you suggest we talk about in the IETF 117 agenda.
Why do I see 2 versions of that slide deck?
I do not know. Frankly, I relied on everything to be managed by Mitico automatically. I also see just one set, so maybe just pick one. Oh no, now I see 2 here. Yeah, pick one, and if it doesn't if it doesn't look like what you expect, then let's try again.
Well, I think it does look Right. So I was hoping we could use this meeting to do a little bit of planning. So not so much focus on any particular document, but just see where we are with the various documents. And so timing-wise, we have 3.5 weeks until the internet draft deadline, and then we have 2 more weeks before the IETF week. So this is kind of the planning outlook that I want to cover today. And I would just like to go through a number of documents that I have on my radar. That doesn't mean that we are complete. So let's see whether the other documents come up. One document that we have had in a waiting mode for a while now is the time tag document. So this is a document that defines CBOR structures to represent timestamps, durations, and periods. And this has been stable for quite a while. It has received the tag allocations. The tag allocations actually came before RFC 89499 changed the registration guidelines. So these were still pretty much first come, first served. And we are just waiting for a good time for this document to be published as an RFC. And one important other activity about information about timestamps in the IETF is the CDATE activity, which had some administrative extra loops, but now has gone through an IETF last call, which is scheduled to close tomorrow. And there are already some interesting comments, but there are probably no impacts on the way time tag accommodates the new CDATE information. So we probably should wait until the CDATE last call has been completed and the area director has pushed this into ISG. But again, I think we're not going to change a lot. So my hope is that we can submit a final version for ISG submission before IETF 117 and possibly don't even have to do very much at IETF 117 because the document has been submitted to the ISG for publication. So that's my outlook on this document. Okay, so please feel free to interrupt me at any time. I'm just going to go to the next item, which is CBOR Pact. That actually passed the working group last call last year already. It actually is a document with 2 parts. One is the part that defines the tags that are used for referencing information out of the tables that CBOR Pact defines. Other people call this dictionary. So that appears to be pretty stable. We had one major change by using the only 2 tables, subtables, one for sharing and one as a generic argument table. We used to have more of those, so we merged those. And what we really want to have before we go ahead is a little bit of implementation and user experience with table setup. So right now the draft defines tag 113 that is used for table setup. That is setting up shared and argument tables separately, and I think we actually want to merge this, at least for the default setup. The idea is that other documents that make use of PACT may go ahead and define their own table setup mechanisms, possibly using tags, possibly using information that comes out of media types, and so on. So the context that is used for interpretation of the CBOR data can also provide table information, but the reference tags should be something that is common to all applications of CBOR PACT. So this can be put into a library and doesn't have to change for each new application that uses CBOR PACT. We should play with the table setup. A couple slides later, I'm going to mention DNS CBOR as an example for an application that defines its own table setup mechanism. I think a little bit more experience is needed to actually be sure that we're happy with the whole situation. So maybe we want to have one more interim where we look at this, maybe in 2 weeks. I don't know, that would be my suggestion, but my suggestion would also be that we have something that we can finally push forward, and we have to decide how exactly we push it forward at IETF-CBOR-20230614-1400. So yeah, I see that Martine is not here. So I was hoping to maybe coordinate that with her. So I will need to have, I will need to do this offline. So that is what I see happening with CBOR PACT. So the next item is the 3 documents that bring us forward on the way to CDA 2.0. There's the grammar update, which is essentially a fix document for 8610 as it is. We define a few more control operators, which is something that is just exercising an extension point that 8610 has. So none of these are really CDA 2.0, but they are things we want to have in place. And the part that is going to be one of the major components of CDA 2.0 is the modules document. I made these slides an hour ago, so they are of course completely outdated by now because the call for adoption has been closed. And so the
it's
next
not official yet. I'll come to that in the next item.
Oh, I'm sorry. The data tracker told me it was official.
Yes, sure it is.
So the data tracker is kind of ratting you out here. Okay, so I was going to ask, do we want to do this? But we will do this in the next item. But that would be something where we probably would think about next steps at 117. My personal guess is that we will push forward the grammar update and the control operators relatively quickly. Because the grammar updates are kind of, yeah, that's some things we need to do. We also can do the control document because that's really something that we probably will be doing somewhat regularly. So the last one was published in December 2022. 21. So maybe having one of those every 2 years or so would be a good keep alive here. And this is essentially based on feedback from various specifiers. Yeah, we need to discuss this, of course, but I don't expect big surprises. We might throw out some of the proposed control operators if they are not clear, but others I think are very, very obvious. So I think we should be able to actually working group last call these two documents pretty soon. The modules document, of course, requires more attention and feedback from people who have used it. So both people who have written specifications and people who have put that into their CDDL tools in one way or another. So all three drafts are implemented. But we don't have multiple independent implementations yet, and that's usually a good thing to actually have. So I would expect we will discuss CDL modules a little bit beyond 117. So one thing that has been discussed on the list a bit is the diagnostic notation. And it seems we actually want a document that goes a little bit beyond the original purpose of this EDN literals document. This was just a simple extension for CBOR diagnostic notation. CBOR diagnostic notation was originally defined in RFC 7049 in 2013. And has been carried over to the current CBOR standard, but we already extended it once in the context of CDDL. So it's a bit confusing maybe for people that RFC 8610 extends the diagnostic notation of RFC 8949, one that comes later in the sequence, but that's the result of this. The attention that we have got points to maybe a need to actually define the ABNF for EDN. Of course, we have implementations, and implementations probably are employing a parser generator, so it should not be too hard to translate the models for those parser generators into ABNF. So that might be an addition we might pursue once we have adopted this. But maybe there's also other work that is useful in the diagnostic notation context. So this is a document where I see active technical work before us, but probably not something that will take beyond IETF 118. So since we just have adopted a document that doesn't have the ABNF yet, we would need to make an explicit decision that we do want to add the ABNF here. So RFC 7049 said that diagnostic notation is not meant to be parsed. And that was a pretty strong concern that people would think that the diagnostic notation is actually how you interchange CBOR documents, and that's very much not the intention. But I think we have survived with the diagnostic notation and the actual CBOR encoding being around for a decade now. So I think the danger of people confusing this is smaller. So I think we can now go ahead and define the ABNF.
So is that something that we would discuss at IETF 117?
Yeah, I think as soon as the proposal is, I mean, if somebody says, no, let's not do that, we can stop that work now. But my intention would be to do a -01 of the draft IETF CBOR EDN that has the ABNF in it, and then we can discuss whether that's useful and decide as a working group whether we want to continue with this or not. And that could be at 117, that could be earlier, depends on how long it takes to actually get the ABNF in there. Not sure I answered your question.
No, you did.
Good, okay. Okay, then we had some interesting discussion about deterministic encoding, and I think we have, I probably shouldn't say cut the Gordian knot. I think we now understand why this discussion was so difficult, because really we have a standard deterministic encoding. We have a common idea of a standard deterministic encoding, but we also have the d-CBOR numeric reduction. So recently I proposed on the mailing list that this should be the two documents we get. The first one might actually even be informational, because the deterministic encoding is defined in 8949. So it would just provide a little bit more explanation and maybe define a profile. Section 4.2 of RFC 8949 does provide applications with some lenience here. So that would be one document. And the other one would pick up this idea of numeric reduction that is in d-CBOR and define that. But it probably could be a very short document because it essentially just sits on top of standard deterministic encoding to address a specific area of application of CBOR. Christopher.
And I think this is quite, I think this is quite reasonable. Oh, wrong. Were you calling for me or for Christian?
Christopher.
Yeah. So yeah, I like this. Seems reasonable. You know, not quite sure how to get started on the split, but we're glad to work with you on that. Or get advice or however you want to do it. I think the thing that is hardest is on the first one, like, how do we explain the choices? How do we explain, our particular profile for section 4.2 and the choices that we made? And ideally it should maybe have somebody else's profile, and maybe anyhow, that's the my question on that one. On the d-CBOR numeric reduction, I think Wolf is can also pull out some of the very specific test cases and things of that nature in the three languages that we've implemented d-CBOR in so far, to kind of show where all the dirty edges are, so to help people be aware of it if they're implementing it in fourth or something weird. All reasonable.
Yeah, so it seems for d-CBOR numeric reduction, there are some choices that have to be made or have been made by you there. It would be possible to define a different numeric reduction. Yeah. And if you have looked at my proof of concept implementation, that works differently from what you did. So we would try to make sure to describe exactly the numeric reduction that we agree is the one everybody should be using in this area of application. But of course, we have at least one additional case, which is people are not using a numeric
Yeah.
reduction. So we would essentially have two widely implemented or widely recognized choices here. And I think
Is
one
it really,
interesting,
is it just two, or do you, I mean, is this more like the same thing with the profiles in one? I mean, is there, I mean, I could, you know, I certainly could see um, I mean, I don't mind profiles, I guess, is maybe the other side of the equation. I'm not, I think we can come up with a really good one that will be hard for somebody to say there's a better numeric reduction out there, but there still may be weird edge cases where
yeah,
somebody goes, I just can't do this on my, you know, old 8-bit processor that I'm using in this constrained thing.
yeah. So I completely agree, but my objective here would be to find the two points that have the largest attractiveness, so we get a lot of critical mass on both those points, so people don't see a need to invent another
Yeah,
profile, but will be attracted to one of the existing ones. So one additional profile that you may not be thinking much about, but that I think is also interesting, is doing the numeric reduction, but then only doing preferred encoding and not deterministic encoding. So that's
okay,
still one useful way of employing this, and
sure.
I think we should explain that. Great. So let's try to work on those. Yeah, and the optimistic uh, objective would be to have documents in individual -00 state as input for 117, so we can discuss the further
Yeah.
work on this there.
So just, you know, just to be clear, we're talking about two new drafts. We would basically not, we would, that would replace the current Gordian draft, um, and move that forward in the CBOR group.
Yeah, not the Gaussian format, but the
Right,
DC-BOR. Yeah.
right.
Okay, and of course, well, I can probably throw together something very quickly based on the text that you have already written. So if you don't mind
Please
me
do.
doing that, that might be the best way or the quickest way to get to a -00. Okay. Yeah, then we have some other active. Oh, I forgot one thing. So if we do the DC-BOR numeric reduction, we probably also want to think about the best way to support this from CDDL, because CDDL is pretty closely wedded to the uh, generic data model that is defined in 8949. And if we actually fold some of the parts of that model onto each other, then we have to define how to write CDDL for that. And that's something where I don't know yet whether we want to put this in the numeric reduction document or maybe into a separate document. And I don't even know how to do it. So this still needs to be invented. It's probably not hard, but we need to find a way that
Yeah.
actually will be easy to use.
Yeah, we've implemented CD in our libraries. We've actually, it's not in our libraries, it's in our tools. We have CDDL 1.0 support now, and you can like point to a dictionary and it'll do more stuff. But it's, you know, really 1.0. You know, it's the first time we mostly use it for a diagnostic, not for other stuff. But I think as, you know, the year advances, you know, we'll you know, move toward the newer CDDL, and you know, we'll be, you know, be glad to try out some ideas with you on, you know, how do we represent the choices in CDDL.
I think the matter is not so much about how to represent the choices, but how to represent that some choice is taken away from the application and is normalized in the model. And whether that will happen through a well-known type or through a CDDL control, we can still find out over time.
Yeah, so
it does feel like it's in a separate document.
Probably.
Because I think we can do the D-CBOR numeric reduction fairly quickly, whereas we don't even have an implementation of it yet for on our end at least. So
I think the difficult part comes in when you have a CDDL model that actually spans components that make use of numeric reductions and components that don't. So for instance, COSI doesn't do numeric reduction, but if you transport something in COSI that does, then you have areas of your specification that do and areas that don't, and we need to find a way to write this down without having tons of additional stuff in the model that is just distracting. So I think that's the hard part. Okay, so the next item here is other active work. There is this process document, CBOR draft numbers, that I think has had a good run up to its 01, but I think we probably should be leaning back a little bit and see whether what we have written up actually works for a majority of cases. Well, it's informational anyway. It's just a way for people to organize their work with allocation of code points during developing a CBOR-based format. But I think if we actually agree on at least a good current practice, might not be the best current practice, but a good current practice, that will continue to be a useful document. So that's one thing. And the other are technical documents. I already mentioned DNS-CBOR, which is of interest by itself, or also as a customer of CBOR Pact. So for me, this is right now pretty much at the top of the list. Then we have the CDDL CSV work that maybe many of you don't have a lot of interaction with, but there actually are areas where CSV is widely used, and it's probably useful to continue this work. And finally, the collection of a corpus of CDDL models that we can refer to using the CDDL2 module mechanism is useful. Of course, the idea is that many of these corpus models will come out of RFCs, but then we have found a number of RFCs that have really useful CDDL, but that needs to be packaged in a slightly different way or needs to be fixed in some way, so it can be usefully referenced from other documents. So this is, it's between informational and standards track, because at some point people will want to reference the models in there, and then it becomes possibly a candidate for being standards track, but it's really mostly just collecting information. So I don't know how much time we will have to discuss these things at 1:17. but these are things that I think are active. Yeah, I probably missed something. So if you think there's something else we should discuss at 117, I would like to hear about it.
Well, one item that, well, I actually have a couple items, but one in particular. So, we've had some pushback by various communities by that, oh, don't use CBOR because, you have to register tags with IANA and that doesn't really happen. It's too hard, et cetera, et cetera. And we said, no, it shouldn't be too hard. The spec says that if you use these different ranges, all you need to have is a spec, in a persistent fashion. So we did one not for DCBOR, but for Gordian, which needs 6 tags that are, where we can't use subtags and stuff. And it's in a range that that is supposed to be available for, spec only, does not require an RFC track document. And, IANA kicked it back to us a couple of times, and I know that it's, been pushed to Karsten and others. So we're basically experiencing what other people were warning us about CBOR. So I'm wondering if there's some way, I don't know if it's a process document or whatever, to either add clarity, like if there is some requirement that, somebody on the CBOR, one of the CBOR chairs has to check off to say, yes, there actually is a spec and it's a real spec before before IANA approves it. That isn't what it says in the CBOR document.
Yeah.
So we need to clarify that.
I think I can clarify here. As far as I understand, there was the pushback here was because the documents are, because there was something that has been dispatched into a working group, and if the intention with the specification was to be processed through a working group, then there would be a different process. If you came there with something that is not that you're not bringing to IETF, that process should have been way smoother. So it's just because
well, there were 2 documents. Yeah, there are 2 documents, so maybe there was a confusion there, because the DCBOR is kind of what dispatch said, hey, the CBOR community ought to consider taking this up. The Gordian, they basically said, you need to find a customer, you need a requirements, or whatever they call it, that you need the problem statement document, et cetera, and was not referred to another working group. So, we just needed to go ahead and get those 6 tags in, because there are people actively using this. We also have more tags we want to register at an even higher level, at even higher numbers that are very specific to, industry. So for instance, we're using CBOR for, cryptocurrency wallets that have, some very specific, things that are, been in use for 2 years. So, we'd also like clarity on the higher tags as well. So, but these core these core 6, we feel like we spent some effort to make it that they were a small number of tags. We did consider whether or not we could do them as sub tags, and we carefully, we feel like we did all the right stuff. What we don't understand is how we could have let IANA know, not to hold it. And so, again, I don't know if that's a process document or just our misunderstanding and the specific circumstances of the fact that we, came to the community, which sort of leads me to my next topic, which is there interest by CBOR community to have, a CBOR RFC on say, graph data specifically, and in particular graph data that supports Merkle.
Okay,
And
that's
I have not heard that, which is
um.
fine. I just
Well,
go ahead.
please hang on. Please hang on a second.
Sorry.
I think this would go into the agenda-wise into the block of Gordian. So, can we keep the order we had on the agenda?
Sure. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
so let
misunderstood.
me try to answer the procedure question. So the operation of registries is generally defined in BCP 26, also known as RFC 8126. And the text in 8949, which ultimately defines how to run these registries, makes use of terms that are defined in RFC 8126. And one concept that 8126 uses a lot is that of a designated expert. So there is no connection to the working group, although it's quite likely that the designated experts are somehow active in the working group as well. But that's not officially part of the procedure. Right now, the two designated experts for CBOR tags, if I remember correctly, are Christian and I.
Yes.
So when you look into the section 9.2 of RFC 8949, this is pretty terse, but it says that the tags between 24 and 32.767 are assigned by the specification required model, which is defined in section 4.6 of RFC 8126. I know these numbers by heart because I've been writing a few IANA considerations sections in the last couple of weeks. Anyway, so specification required is a special case of expert review, where the expert is supposed to not only review the registration request itself, but also a specification that is required to come with the registration request. And well, I did a first review. It's not something that can be done just in a snap. It does require some thinking. So we also made sure that we have 1+2 numbers available that are first come, first served, which is another set of rules defined in 8126 that really makes sure you get a number right away. So if the priority is on speed, that's the number range you want to use. But of course, these are not the nice numbers. These are the numbers that cost you 3 bytes instead of 2. So it may be desirable to try to get numbers in the 24 to 255 range. I regularly send an output of a script that looks at tag allocation. And you have to remember that tag allocation is a process that has to work for, well, half a century or so until we completely are at a new format. So we shouldn't be allocating tons of tags in 1 year. So we then don't have any free tag numbers in the next year. So right now, about 30% of the 1+1 space are taken. So there is some frugality that the experts will try to exercise in allocating these numbers. That doesn't mean it is hard to get them, but it just means it will get a second look. which is different, for instance, for 1+0, which is already defined as standards action in the RFC, because
Right.
there are only 11 left. So we looked at the specification, and there are some questions that I haven't written up yet. What confused us was that this specification was both presented as a completed specification that is now trying to get tags, and a specification that might be input to an IETF process that is likely to change it. So it is maybe less obvious that we would be allocating 1+1 tags to these 1+1 numbers to these tags, then if this was a specification that is completed, I mean, the mobile driver license stuff or anything like that, they may not need 1+1 tags, but yes, it is harder to get those 1+1 tags than 1+2 tags. So if you really want to prioritize the speed of getting the allocation, then going into the first come first served mechanism would be good.
Okay. So let me explain a little. So this is where we get into kind of the question territory. Actually, no, Christian, this is Gordon. Now, for me to proceed, I need to go into the Gordian discussion. So let's move on your agenda, and then I can bring it back up.
Okay, then I'll do that next point very quickly, because then we can use, I think, the rest of the time for Gordian. We had working group adoption calls for EN literals and CDL 2.0. Carsten already gave away that yes, they are now adopted, because we have good support for the CDDL 2.0 documents. And for EN literals is more of a niche program where I'm very comfortable accepting this based on the interim input that says, yeah, it's like, look, it's looking good, and nobody was complaining. So yes, let's go ahead with this. Authors, which is Carsten, I think, please submit as IETF documents. And with that, back to Gordian.
Yeah, so let me explain some of our dilemmas that are going on right now with Gordian envelope. So right now, Gordian pieces of the Gordian envelope have been in use in practice in mostly cryptocurrency communities for the last couple of years. And the Gordian envelope kind of pulls it all together. It also is connected loosely to W3C in the sense that there have been a number of parties there who are frustrated with a particular graph data format, JSON LD, and there's been a proposal. I think there's an IETF draft on taking JSON LD and doing it with CBOR, but also loses a lot because it's still tied to its JSON LD roots. That being said, there's really not very many people in the IETF community that are demanding graph CBOR data. The ISO community also is been working on MDL, MDoc, etc. And it's not a very transparent process, so I don't really understand all their stuff. But they're using CBOR, and there's been various inquiries from them of maybe, in future things, leveraging some of the Gordian capabilities to do hash-based elision. The current MDL, which is being used for mobile driver's licenses in Europe and in the United States, is CBOR, and it has a very simple hash-based elision technique in it. But it, it's ISO. And others are wanting to do that stuff with that. So, so our challenge has been, is the IETF community interested in this? And, we wrote up some use cases of, hey, RFs, there are 2 RFCs that say that, that IETF standards should minimize data, and there's these human rights considerations, et cetera, which makes hash-based elision and other techniques for minimal disclosure recommended. But there, no IETF specs that we know of are doing this. So we may have customers in IETF, but we don't know because right now they're not asking for it. So that's kind of the root of the problem that we went when we went before dispatch is, we have a solution for various parties that just happen to be using CBOR. But otherwise, IETF, so far, we've not identified an IETF group. There is some discussion, there was at least some discussion in passing that by the supply chain group that, maybe Gordian envelope might, be something that they would like to use. But I don't think they're really, at all focused at that layer, the data layer at this point. And I think they would rather see somebody else do it and then they could leverage it. I could be wrong there, but that's, my interpretation of, following that discussion. Separate from, one of the other issues, just to be blunt, is, and I know we're running out of time, is that we really want Gordian envelope not to be in the security area. We're really only using one cryptographic function, which is a hash. We're using SHA-256. It's well understood. We're using a hash, a Merkle hash tree, which is well understood. Yes, it ought to get, additional review, but we really want to focus on it as a data standard because, you can put COSE into it. You can put, other, all kinds of other cryptographic formats, et cetera, into it. Similarly, we have tags for compression. So we have some tags for encryption, but those do not specify which one. And in fact, in our examples, we're using IETF standards like, Cha-Cha Poly, stripped to the RFC, and such. So we're really trying to avoid, that's another layer, so we don't want to get bundled into COSE, 2.0 or something of that nature either. And I presume there might also be people that maybe don't care about the hash-based elision, but would like to have, we believe a CBOR function, a CBOR approach that can handle at least 3, maybe 4 of the different graph formats that are out there: edge graphs, node graphs, some single one-way graphs, et cetera. So we also feel like there might be some desire to have some standardization around how to put graph data into CBOR that might be valuable to people. But again,
just brief note.
We need to move ahead.
just a brief note. If you want answers too, please come to the point and make it short because we're about to run out of time.
Right. So I'm just trying to puzzle. Are the chairs of the community and other members who are here today or might be at 117 at all interested in taking some measure of Gordian envelope and working with us to, have it be a CBOR art area project? And if not, let's we don't need it to do what we need to do. We can, but we have multiple companies that are using envelope now, and we would prefer that standards first, but we also have to have implementations.
Well, the chair position is very simple. My task in that role is just to assess the the interest within the working group. With my chair hat off, I do have some interest in expressing graph structures. I think I've pointed you to Coral at an earlier point in time. But my personal interest is mainly with using CBOR for constrained applications where that already have some data that already work on minimized data and will probably not work with larger data structures that are inflated by the possibility of having a lesion. So the things will be minimized beforehand, specifically for them. But that's more of my personal take here. So one voice of many.
Yeah. So I think these are interesting questions. On the other hand, I'm actually looking at the document. I hope I'm looking at the right document, Draft McNally Envelope 02. And this is interesting. It's a collection of things that maybe aren't as closely related to each other as you
Yes, agreed.
try to make us believe in the document. So in particular, the tags 204, 205, 206 are interesting in that they embody the choice of a specific algorithm to do something. So 204 is digest, and it actually is a digest with SHA-256. 205 is encrypted, but really it is encrypted with what was it, SHA-20 or something like that. And 206
right. Those are the defaults unless you do subtags.
Okay, and 206 is compressed with deflate. And I think these are all tags which are really likely to change over time as people, for instance, get better compression libraries. There are now at least two compression libraries that are widely used in certain areas of application that are replacing deflate after it has been kind of the de facto standard for a quarter of a century. So these tags feel quite different to a designated expert on tag allocation than the other ones. There is one more.
So we may have failed. 1 second. We, I think, have failed somehow, either in our spec or in our writing or whatever, to say that these were very specifically designed so that you could have other choices. We just simply said, we just simply defined a default choice that was a current IETF standard. But all of these, and we know people are going to be doing other forms of compression and encryption and, et cetera, et cetera. So the design was that these were independent. We may have failed in it in our expression of it in this RFC to demonstrate that these were independent. But we don't really want to define compression standards. We just simply say, if it's within this tag, it's compressed. If it's within this tag, it's encrypted. If it's within this tag, et cetera. The only one that's kind of challenging for us was the hash algorithm. And part of that just came out of the recognition of likely, if just because of a variety of different factors, if we because our original version was Blake and we basically retreated to SHA-256, was that there was a lot more dependencies there, and we kind of felt like, well, if there needs to be another algorithm, SHA-3, God forbid, and that would probably just be a different root envelope tag that would basically say, use this other it would be, another 1+1 that, is envelope not using SHA-256. And we don't really want to specify that right now. SHA-256 has a long life. So I think we may have failed there, and would love to have guidance in expressing that better. And again, I think there's a really good likelihood that unless there are more people in the community that in the CBOR community that want to tackle this, that we just continue implementing this, have multiple implementers, and we come back to the IETF community later for standardizing CBOR. Gordian on CBOR. And right now it feels like to me that's greater than 50% chance. But I at least want to throw it out that that it is possible if there's critical mass in the CBOR community to do this, that we'd be glad to do that. DCBOR, on the other hand, we absolutely want to do everything we can to make sure at least DCBOR and the numeric reduction things are well defined. And we really appreciate, Karsten, that you've been thinking deeply about this and have kind of pulled together, something that I think will address, various people's concerns.
So
it's separate. It just happens to be that Gordian uses DCBOR.
What I would like to point out is that we have a registry for hash algorithms. So have a look at RFC 9054. And I think we really want to make use of that registry in any format that is supposed to live for a certain amount of time. We have a registry for encryption algorithms, and encryption is complicated enough that this requires some pretty significant thought, and that's defined by 1952 and filled in by 1953. We do not have a CBOR registry for compression mechanisms, and that's definitely something we would want to fill in. But you have one more, which is the 202, which I can't wrap my head around. So it seems that the 202 is essentially a way to exercise a function that is defined somewhere else, and that just gets a number in the table in section 6 of your document. I think we have to discuss this a bit, because that's a place where I would say the specification actually has a big hole, because those functions are not nearly defined by the document.
So, okay, so let me, so I guess the question is, so I understand your review as the designated expert for these numbers. And if this is going to be a CBOR group item, these concerns and, affixing them and addressing them, et cetera, are, things that we need to address to move toward consensus in the CBOR community and in IETF. But in the meantime, that might be another year to do that. And if there isn't going to be, consideration, we need to kind of move ahead. If this isn't going to be a CBOR work item, is our only choice to move to the 3 bytes? I hope not. We've made some decisions there. The known value thing, maybe we could architect a better version. I'll talk with him about it. It's mostly because we kept on running into assertions that were the same and large. And we just wanted to be able to have a very quick way to have a reference lookup for things like, for the common, predicates, without having to go to an IANA registry and a new tag and all of that. So maybe we could do it in a better way. But we thought that at least all the other elements were independent, with the exception, as I said, the hash algorithm. We have some experience from the people that are trying to standardize with Filecoin, IPFS, et cetera, with their kind of weird tagging of hashes for what is it? Anyhow, there's that, they're also trying to advance another hash table draft, and we just wanted to get out of that. We just need a hash tree that is relatively safe and consistent, and that you don't have to do a lot of games to sort of figure out, oh well, I don't support Blake 3, and thus I need to notify the party that I don't support Blake 3. I only support NIST algorithms and all of that stuff. We were just trying to avoid that by saying, just let's for now use SHA-256. It's well supported. It's well understood. It has maybe some potential weaknesses, but nobody really knows, when those will come into play. And we have a strategy for doing that. So in lieu of the CBOR community tackling this, we would really like to see these tags, accepted soon. So without having to go to the 3 bytes.
Yeah, that's probably a place where the designated experts will have a conversation with you why certain things cannot be done in 3 bytes instead of 2. Yeah, but I think that we first of all have to understand the specification and what the strategy of the specification is to deal with algorithm agility. And we also have to understand this 202 thing. So I think we need to close this meeting. We should continue this discussion offline.
Okay. So the question is, this is you as designated experts, not you
Yes.
as CBOR chairs. And
Carsten
going back to our previous item, I would love there to be some. So this is not what the spec says. This is not what So I'm fine if that is the way it has to be. That the designated experts have to deeply understand the choices that we made and request changes, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not what the spec says. The spec says that that the doc has to have a clear specification. So if that is not true, we have a lot of other companies and organizations that want to start using CBOR and are going, no, we're not going to use CBOR because we have to register these tags, and registering a tags is a pain in the ass. This is an example of that. So yes, maybe we just have to punt and say we're only going to try to register the 3 byte tags and do the first use or whatever until everybody just don't even bother with anything that isn't a 3 byte tag. I don't think that's a good idea. And again, that's not really what the spec says. So I would love to have some clarity, from the CBOR community of what is the designated export supposed to review or not review in these
So let me quickly answer that.
Between the 2 levels.
There is a section 4.6 in RFC 8126 that is probably useful to read, because that's the section that is being referenced by 8949. Unfortunately, it's not being done by an actual section reference, so that's something we didn't quite get right. But the
RFC 8146. I'm sorry.
8126.
It's in the
26. Got it. Sorry. Got it.
And there is a section 4.6, and there are things that are required about the specification that are written down only there, and maybe you get a better feeling of what we are trying to achieve.
Okay. Okay, that helps. I will pass.
And maybe as a note on algorithm agility, I think generally, if something comes into the designated experts that does not have that says that we're picking one algorithm and that will be good for a long time, I think chances are that this will be better off with a 3 byte tag.
Okay. Okay. I will, talk with Wolf and the rest of the Gordian community about this and move forward. I thank you for your time. I know we're running late. So, is any of this a topic for the IETF meeting? Because we're hoping to bring some of the CBOR community who are not active IETF members, the Gordian community who are not currently IETF participants to the San Francisco meeting, because a lot of them are, on the West Coast. Is this worthy of discussion at the CBOR meeting? Or
It depends.
I don't know.
I would hope that we have completed the discussion by that point, but
Okay,
maybe
cool.
there are things that we want to discuss further from there.
Thing is, we do have a 1 hour slot, so
Yeah.
I still have to do the scheduling, but at tops this will get like 15 minutes, and if you allow me the personal comment, I think you'll have to bring things to the point very fast to get all the discussion out of those 15 minutes.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. Well, we're hoping to have some side meetings, so that also can be topic for side meetings. So
that is definitely a good idea, and something that we'll need to advertise through the CBOR channels. And before we get kicked out of the room, which is probably any second now, thank you everyone for being here. Thanks for the good discussions, and I'll try to make all of this into a preliminary agenda for IETF 117. Thanks everyone. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.